Hi, everyone. We're just going to wait for another few seconds until folks gather digitally. This is Partners for Progressive Israel's webinar, Public Opinion in the Media Landscape in Israel in the Wake of October 7. And we'll get started in just another few seconds. Also waiting. This is also available if folks find it easier on Facebook Live, which will be up and running in a few seconds as well. Okay, why don't we get started? Again, the name of this webinar is Public Opinion in the Media Landscape in Israel in the Wake of October 7th. I want to say hi to everyone tuning in the US, in Israel and Palestine, other places in the world. The webinar series that this is part of is called Conversations with Israel and Palestine. And my name is Ron Skolnick. I organize these webinars on behalf of Partners for Progressive Israel. Today's discussion moderator will be Rabbi Andrea London. Before I hand it over to her, I will note that Partners for Progressive Israel is an American not-for-profit dedicated to the achievement of a durable and just peace between Israel and its neighbors, and that includes an end to Israel's occupation based on a two-state solution. Partners supports Israelis working to ensure social justice, civil rights, Jewish-Arab partnership, and equality for all of Israel's inhabitants. And the organization seeks to deepen Americans' understanding of Israel's and Palestine's complexities so that they can better advocate for a progressive future for all the inhabitants of the region. Partners, as always, is bringing you this webinar for free, but if you enjoy it and want more programming like it in the future, you know what to do, progressiveisrael.org, and if you can, make a contribution there. A quick few notes. First, about upcoming programming. On May 5, Partners for Progressive Israel will be starting the spring session of its digital Israel-Palestine Symposium, and that session is called The Day After Toward a Shared Future. There'll be 2 sessions a day on May 5, May 19, June 2, and June 23. And you can register for those as a whole or individually, a la carte, as I like to put it, and details will be out soon at progressiveisrael.org. A quick note about the chat and the Q&A. If you have a question to ask, please do, but please put it in the Q&A section. The chat is not going to be monitored for questions by our panel. Feel free to chat amongst yourselves, but if you have a question, place it in the Q&A, and if we can get to it, we will. Having said that, let me introduce our panel in brief and hand things over. First, Professor Tamar Herman is a senior research fellow at the Israel Democracy Institute and academic director of the Viterbi Family Center for Public Opinion and Policy Research. The center applies rigorous, innovative, and pioneering research methods to document the attitudes of the Israeli public regarding thousands of issues in all aspects of life: politics, culture, ideology, religion, education, and national security. I'm a big fan of the work they do, and I recommend it personally. Since 2010, Professor Herman has headed the team which develops and produces the annual Israeli Democracy Index, and since 2018, the monthly Israeli Voice Index. And for the quarter century before that, she produced the monthly Peace Index in collaboration with Professor Ephraim Yaar of Tel Aviv University. Professor Herman is also a professor of political science at the Open University. Oren Persico is a staff writer at the Seventh Eye, Ha'ayin HaShvi'it, which is an independent Israeli website devoted to journalism and freedom of speech. Since joining in 2007, Persico has extensively covered the Israeli media landscape, focusing on instances of journalistic malpractice, external influences on news reporting, biased portrayals of Palestinians, and other topics. Since 2017, he's been providing thorough coverage of the legal proceedings involving Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israeli media publishers. In 2023, Persico, alongside 2 colleagues, was honored with the Sokolov Award, Israel's prestigious journalism award, in recognition of their collective contributions. Last but not least, our moderator today is Rabbi Andrea London. She served Beth Emet, the Free Synagogue in Evanston, Illinois, since 2000, and has been the congregation's senior rabbi since 2010. She has served as a vice president of the Chicago Board of Rabbis and co-chair of the Jewish Council on Urban Affairs Jewish-Muslim Community Building Initiative. She's a leader in interfaith relations and activism on both the local and national levels. And in 2014, she was named by the Forward newspaper as one of America's most inspiring rabbis for her work on racial equity. Rabbi London is a board member of Partners for Progressive Israel and also co-chairs the J Street Rabbinic and Cantorial Cabinet. She's been involved in peace and justice activism in Israel and Palestine for more than 30 years. Let me now hand things over to Rabbi Andrea London. I'll be back at the end to wrap up proceedings and say thank you. I hope it is an interesting and enriching webinar, and thank you to our panelists for agreeing to participate today.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you to Oren and Tamar. And we're really looking forward to your presentations here in the United States and the progressive community. We are really interested in hearing about the political opinions of Israelis and what you have to tell us about Palestinians also who live within Israel and in the occupied territories, and how this will have an influence on how the war is being conducted and the future political landscape. Oren, certainly you clearly know that from your work with covering Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. But today we're going to start with Tamar, and then move to Oren, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions. And again, a reminder to put the questions in the Q&A, and I will be moderating them after Tamar and Oren have a chance to present to us. Thank you so much for being here with us.
So it's me, right? So good day to you. It's good evening here. I'm delighted to be with you today, and I'll try to show you how things look like on the level of Israeli public opinion. My opening remark would be that we don't have one public opinion in Israel. In a way, people did not expect it coming after October 7th, but in many respects, we are back to where we were on October 6th in terms of people's division into the various political camps in Israel. And on many issues that I'll show you immediately, we see totally different public opinions. On certain issues, of course, many people think alike. But on some key issues, we will see big differences within the Jewish majority community and between the Jews and the Israeli Arabs. By the way, Andrea, they prefer, according to all surveys, to be related to as Israeli Arabs or Arabs. Of course, the intellectuals and the elites are more inclined into defining themselves in terms of being Palestinian Israelis or Palestinians. But when we measure it once and again, and others as well, it's not only our finding, the majority of the Israeli Arabs prefer to be referred to as Israeli Arabs for a variety of reasons, which I'll not get into now. So I'll start sharing with you my data, and I'll explain what you see, and I'll be very glad to answer any question you might have. I warn you from the start that I suppose that in this forum, some people will not be very happy to see what's going on the public opinion level in Israel. So here we go. See? Can you see my presentation? Okay. Do you see the slides? Okay. So the first issue that is important to keep in mind is that basically, in many respects, people at the center of Israel, I'm not talking about the people who were evacuated on the south and in the north, people are back to a new normal life. They keep in mind, of course, what happened, and of course, the fears are still there. But when we ask them to which extent, to what extent, your personal life, work, media consumption, get-togethers with family and friends, return to normal. And so, as you can see, in December, 51% of the Jews said yes. We are already half of the population 3 months after October said yes, we are to some normal life. 62% in January and almost 70% in February. We are already at the end of March, so I assume that if we will repeat this question in the near future, we will get even a higher percentage than that. For example, we know that about a quarter of flight tickets were purchased for the Passover holiday and after. So although of course October 7th it's always here, on the practical level, people are much back to their life and they want to keep it this way. And this is why, as I'll show you in several minutes, the expectations for a huge wave of anti-government protest has not realized until now, but my guess is, or my professional assumption is, that we're not going to see it in the foreseeable future. So if people expect that the government will be toppled because of bottom-up pressures, I don't see it coming. And if you look at the Israeli Arabs or the Israeli Palestinians, you see that in December it was 40%, now it is 65%, very similar to the Jewish majority group, which means that although there is some military operations happening in Gaza and of course in the north, basically many of the Israelis are living their life, keeping in mind what happened, but not necessarily changing the basic assumptions about life, and also of no intention to rock the boat or rock the ship in the foreseeable future. We asked about levels of solidarity, and as you can see, in June, at the peak, or one of the peaks of the judicial reform protest, the assumption was that solidarity was in one of its lowest points since we started to measure it in 2011, and it jumped up in October. In October, it seems that everyone is together, Jews and Arabs, religious and non-religious, even the ultra-Orthodox were part of it. And therefore, there was this slogan, together we will win this war. But immediately afterward, in December already, we started to see a decline in this sense of solidarity. And today it is even lower than it was. The interesting thing is the increase in the number of the Arabs who said that level of solidarity increased. And indeed, in many respects, the cooperation between Jews and Arabs in Israel in the first month of the war was unprecedented and highly impressive. Things changed a bit since then, but it was, in a way, it was a point, I don't know if of no return, but a point to be referred to in the future as a possibility of cooperation under certain circumstances. Then this was measured a week ago, less than a week ago, and we wanted to do how the office holders are doing in the eyes of the Israeli public. This is the total sample, Jews and Arabs together. And as you can see, first came the chief of staff, Herzi Halevi, but still less than half said that he is doing very well or pretty well. Normally, the chief of staff would have gotten in Israel very, very high grades for his functioning. If you take the so together, it will come to 68%. But when we asked about, for example, trusting in the professionalism of the army per se, the people who are taking part in the military operation, we get over 80%. So the leadership of the army is still suffering from the aftershock of October 7th. Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant, a bit less, 40%. It's much better than it was in October. He jumped up a bit. Minister Benny Gantz, 34%, 1/3 is saying that he's functioning well or very well. And here you have Prime Minister Netanyahu with 28% only, saying that his performance in regard to the war is good or very good. Even less a Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, and Minister of Finance, Bezalel Smotrich, is at the bottom. So actually we have two groups, one group which is functioning good or so-so, and one group that is functioning bad or even very bad, okay? This doesn't mean, or it doesn't necessarily reflect the results of future elections, because other considerations are entering the picture, but still it's not a very good situation for a prime minister during the war to get about 1/4 only saying, a bit over 1/4, and 57% saying is doing a very bad job. Okay, so this is the picture as far as the politicians are concerned. So I'm back to the civil protests. We measured it for the first time in November and then in February. And as you can see, Arab sample about 2/3 expected to have a huge wave of protest. Amongst the left, here you see a very clear difference. Almost 100%, 92% said, yes, we are going to see a huge wave of protests coming. Center, and that's the difference, big difference between the left and the center. And the right expected immediately after the war to have an extensive public protest, and it decreased to only half. But when we ask them, are you going to take part in that? So a majority on the left said, yes, we will personally take part in such a protest. 60% of the center and less than 30% on the right. Let me remind you that the right in Israel constitutes about 60 to 60-something% of the Jewish population. The center is 25 to 27%, and the left is only 13%, 14% in a very good day, which means that when we see that only 1/3 are, or less than 1/3 are going to take part, this means that we will not see millions and millions of people coming to the street in order to protest against the incumbent government. And this means that we are back to what I said at the beginning, that I don't see the government being toppled by grassroots pressures from below. Now to the Israeli-Palestinian relations. Should Israel agree or not agree to pursue the two-state solution in order even to continue to receive American assistance, even without just, I just put it something functionalist here to say, okay, you don't want to lose the Americans, and still, we say we should, a majority of the Jews said we should not agree, and a majority amongst the Arabs say, yes, we should agree. But when we segment the Jewish respondents by their political self-identification, 75% of the left say, yes, we should acknowledge it. And even when we ask it on principle without the issue of the American assistance, the left has a significant majority, solid majority, saying yes, we should. The center is already so because on many security related issues, the center is closer to the right than to the left. On other issues, LGTB rights and so on, it's much closer to the left, but on security, it is closer to the right. And on the right, we got 70% saying no, we shouldn't, even if the assistance of the Americans would be jeopardized by not acknowledging it. Now, should we act with the Americans or according to our Israeli leadership considerations only? And this is very interesting because we had in the past we had 51% said by our leaders. In January it was a bit lower, but more than those who said yes, we should coordinate everything with the Americans. And the day before yesterday, I didn't have time to calculate everything and put it in here. It was back to the 50% and something. So the pressures being put by the Americans in a way boomerang, particularly on the right, because you see that on the right, we had a majority, a stable majority, saying, no, we should trust our leaders and not the Americans. On the left, as expected, the majority say, yes, we should coordinate with the Americans what we are doing. I'm almost at the end. Now we asked about support the idea of establishing an independent Palestinian state without American assistance, without anything. We are at one of the lowest points ever. The graph starts at 94, which means many years ago during the Oslo process. And we were about more than a half, give and take. But since the 2011, we see a decline, and now we are here. Less than 1/3 amongst the Jews are supportive. The Arabs are much more supportive. Jews on the left are similar, even higher than the Israeli Arabs. I can explain why, but this is not the right time. Center less than a half, and right only 16%. And this is in principle, not tomorrow, not in the context of any regional treaty or anything. So certainly as of today, the idea of a Palestinian state is something that is not acceptable to the majority of the Israelis. And this is the answer why the Palestinian state is established. How will this affect Palestinian terrorism against Israel? And you can see that at the center and the left, they think that it will either remain the same or increase. Okay, so they see it as a dangerous move from the security point of view. They don't see it as the end of the conflict. Okay, and this was the case even in the 90s, although the left is of course different in this regard. And this is one before my last slide, and this is the slide that I feel very bad about introducing to you, because I thought whether I should put it in or not, but then I decided to be totally open with you, although I feel that it's very horrible. Should we take the suffering of the Palestinians into account for operational planning purposes of the war in Gaza? Of course. We have 80% saying no. And in order to get 80% here, we need a majority of the center and also many of the left saying the same. Okay? Of course, on the Arab side, it's totally different. But the fact that it didn't change from October to November to February, this is something that we should really keep in mind when we think about the future. And this shows you a very similar finding, supporting or opposing the transfer of humanitarian aid to Gaza with food and medicines. We didn't say anything else. We didn't talk about iron and concrete and whatever, food and medicine. And we said that it will be transferred by international bodies that are not linked to Hamas and to UNRWA. And you can say the total of the Jews, 68% say no. Okay, on the left, it's a bit different, but center majority say no. And on the left, on the right, 80% said no. So actually, this is what I wanted to share with you in order to make you understand what is the environment for the decision-making here in Israel. And this is not necessarily reflected in the media, but we are doing it on every 10 days or every 20 days, depending on the developments, and everything is open to the public. If you just want to see the entire data set and all the questions, I will give you the URL where you should go. It's in Hebrew and in English, and you can also do some cross-tabulation by yourself, even if you don't know statistics at all, because you just say, please segment this question by this question. So you have plenty of data there for free. Maybe you'll find some beacon of help that I found difficult to find in many of these questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tamar, for that data. I just want to ask a couple of questions of clarification while we have you, and then we'll move on to Oren. Somebody asked if you have a further division of the Israeli Jewish population into Ashkenazi, Mizrahi, Russian, other Jewish communities, if you see that there's any differences among the different ethnic communities within Israel.
The most influential factor is level of religiosity. Besides the political orientation, it's level of religiosity, where we have a majority of hardliners amongst the National Orthodox and the Ultra-Orthodox. Amongst the traditionalists, we divide the traditionalists into traditionalists more religious and traditionalists less religious. So the more religious are very similar to the national religious. The not so religious Masoretim are closer to the secular, but I should say that the secular, that are about 44% of the population, are equally divided between left, center, and right. So amongst the secular, we don't have a majority of people who are holding liberal views on these issues. So we have about age. The youngsters are more to the right than the middle-aged and the older groups. So we have it by gender, we have it by income, we have it by everything is found in the Data Israel homepage. This is where our data is stored and open, as I said.
Thank you. Oren.
Hi, thanks for having me, and thank you for watching this. I might give a bit of an explanation as to why the data in the first slide and the one before the last is so horrible. I mean, people live their own lives like they used to before October 7th, and people do not want to show any empathy to what's going on in Gaza, I think mainly because of the worldview that they have in Israel, and that is starkly different from what you guys see outside in Europe or the US. I mean, it's always been like this. When there's a war in Gaza, in previous military operations in Gaza, you never saw the human cost of the war in Israeli mainstream media, but there's never been such a prolonged operation, such a long war, and there's never been so many casualties like in this war. It's less than 2 hours drive to Gaza, and nothing, almost nothing of the human cost manages to enter the mainstream media in Israel. You see rubble and you see streets that are just dust, but you don't see people. You don't get the data. You don't get the numbers. When the death toll reached 10,000 or 20,000 or 30,000, it's not a worthy news item. And if it's a news item, it's not a headline. It's not the headline. And if you do see a number, it's always contextualized with the fact that these numbers come from the Hamas-controlled Ministry of Health in Gaza. Even though in previous conflicts, there was no real difference between the numbers that Hamas provided and the numbers that the IDF provided after the war. There were differences in calling some of the male 18 to 50 militants, soldiers, terrorists, or civilians. But if you look at women and children, they usually have rather precise numbers. So obviously, there is a huge catastrophe going on next to us that Israeli public knows nothing about. And the Israeli media takes every opportunity to emphasize the real Israeli victimhood. What happened on October 7th, there are still stories coming out, and soldiers dying every day, and etc. There's a terrorist attack here and there, almost, everywhere. But nothing about the victims that we we create. I'll give you an example. A few weeks ago, I saw in one of Israel's leading newspapers, in the Weekend magazine, a story about Israeli military dogs that died on the mission. And there was like 4 pages with 8 dogs, 10 dogs. Each dog had a name, a photograph, a story of his heroism, and the way he was killed during action. That is something that children and women and elderly people, humans, if they're Palestinians in Gaza, will never get in Israel. There was a humanitarian convoy of orphans transferred from Gaza to the West Bank. And the journalist who broke the story said, this is unbelievable. And for the first second, I thought, wow, maybe he's saying it's unbelievable because finally we're doing something that's humane, just helping orphans continue to live. But no, he thought this was an abomination. It's something we shouldn't do during a war. So the situation here is as worse as I can remember. If you look at the Israeli media, of course, there is Haaretz and some independent outlets who do give you round and deep view of the world around you, but most Israeli media just fails completely in doing, I think, what is supposed to be the first thing that the journalist does, and that is gather facts about the world around you that are relevant and bringing them to your attention. I didn't prepare any slides or anything, so if you have a question, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you. We have lots and lots of questions here. One question here for you, Oren. Regards what happened on October 7th. Al Jazeera had an investigative unit that looked at the footage that came out from that day. And the investigation, so this is, I'll read the question here. The I unit reveals widespread human rights abuses by Hamas fighters and others who followed them through the fence from Gaza into Israel. But the investigation also found that many of the worst stories that came out in the days following the attack were false. This was especially true of atrocities that were used repeatedly by politicians in Israel and the West to justify the ferocity of the bombardment of Gaza Strip, such as the mass killing of babies and allegations of widespread systematic rape. So I don't know if you have anything to say about those reports and the truth of what really happened on October 7th.
Well, I don't think it really matters. I mean, from the public war perception, it does matter, of course. And we have to remember that beside the real war on the ground, there is a public war, the public discourse war between pro-Israelis and anti-Israelis, and you shouldn't exaggerate. But I think the Israeli politicians who called for an extermination of Gaza or slaughter of Gaza would have said the same even if the stories about the dead children weren't published, even if the worst stories would never been conceived, the false stories. I don't think that's made such a difference. The horrors were bad enough without the made-up events.
So this is a question certainly many in the progressive Jewish community have been getting from their more right-wing friends. So this is a good one to ask. How should I respond to my right-wing friends when they say that it's hypocritical to focus on the civilian deaths in Gaza when nobody says FDR or Churchill or Truman were war criminals for killing civilians in World War II?
Well, this was an issue that was raised in Israel many times. They said the Americans did a pretty good job in this in Vietnam, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and whatever, and that the world is using double standards when it comes to Israel, to Israelis, and whatever. So that's a very common counter argument here when we hear to what was said or what is being said abroad. And in a way, and Oren, let me know if you agree with me. It gives a good excuse for the right-wing politicians to say, you see, they don't believe us. They are using different criteria about us. Assad did what he did in Syria, and no one said anything, and there was no. So by blaming Israel for fabricating facts, or by saying that it was never done in human history, you are just helping, not you, but the people who are saying that are just helping the side that is pushing people into believing that they are really being persecuted by the entire world, and people when they feel defensive, they do not open their hearts and minds to the fact that Oren just spoke about. So I think that people think about the counter reaction that these kind of arguments they are not helping the liberals in Israel in order to convince people that human rights and the sufferings of the other should be taken into consideration I'm always telling about this song that is being sang in kindergartens. The entire world is against us. Never mind, we shall overcome. Right? When you're 4 or 5 years old, and this kind of attacks only justify this perspective of the I would say people from outside of the region, because Israelis do not expect much of people within the region. But say about Americans or the West, it pushed us back to places where we hope to be out of when Israel felt that it is secured. For years now, Israel felt that it was secured, because before October 7th, when we asked people what should be the main issues for the government to deal with, security was not one of them, because they felt that security was delivered by the IDF and by the other agencies. So cognitively, even if people are back to their normal life, so as if cognitively we were pushed to, I would say, to the pre-Oslo process, if not even back to the place where the existential threat is in the mind of so many Israelis. Mothers in Tel Aviv talked about their dreams about hiding their kids in it's like Anna Frank kind of. Okay, they thought, in which closet should I put my kids in? And it's certainly unhealthy, and it's even very far from the truth. But with people's fears, it's very difficult to argue. Sorry, Oren, for taking such a long time.
Of course, I agree, and I would add my perspective that the Israeli media portrayed October 7th as an existential threat to Israel. I don't think a serious military commentator would say that. And I actually read serious military commentators saying that even if Hezbollah would have joined, it would have been very hard. But I don't think it's anywhere near 73 or any real existential threat to Israel. But that's the feeling here, and it's still being pumped. This is a war between complete good and complete evil. We are fighting for our home. We are fighting for our life. And we are still the victims. And what happens is that the moment someone is confronted with a different point of view, he speaks to someone from the US, or even hears Condoleezza Rice or President Biden saying that we shouldn't continue with the military operation. They're shocked. They don't understand how someone could say that, because they are completely locked in their own bubble of ignorance. And I just want to add one thing about this. Israelis are very well trained in being ignorant of what's going on around them. You know, there's been decades of a military dictatorship just next to us, with children being killed because they threw a Molotov bottle, or even if they didn't, and horrible things going on in the occupation daily, and before October 7th, of course. And people didn't want to know about it, and effectively did not know about what's going on close to them. So it might have taken them a bit of an effort to make the ignorance bubble a little more hard, and, you know, put even more knowledge of what's going on in the world outside of their consciousness. But the mechanism is there, and very well trained. So the Israeli society, it's not, I would believe that any Western country that would be involved in something like this, if you look at the US in Afghanistan or Iraq, you know, they don't show everything, they don't know everything. In Israel, however, we are very good at not knowing what our army does. So that's maybe explains why the way we view the situation is so different from the way people outside of Israel view it.
Oren, as a journalist, do you think the journalists want to cover what's happening in Gaza, in terms of the human impact of the war, or not, or they know that the Israeli public doesn't want to hear it, and so they don't cover it? I mean, what is happening? What is preventing that word about what's happening in Gaza from
Of
entering
course,
into the Israeli media?
of course, nobody tells them not to cover. I mean, the military censorship doesn't forbid them to cover
Okay.
what's going on in Gaza. It's self-censorship. A lot of them work in commercial media,
Mm.
and they don't want to upset the public, I guess. But it's not just that.
Mm.
Israeli journalists are part of the Israeli society. They have friends and family who were killed or shot at October 7th, and there may be children going fighting in Gaza right now. And like Tamar's data showed, most of Israeli society is very much on the right in this military operation. Even if you take into accountability the fact that Israeli journalists, like most of the world, are more to the left than the entire society, they're still part of the society. And part of the left also doesn't want to know anything about what's going on in Gaza in the human factor. If you look for something optimistic, I might say that only the far-right Israeli media celebrates the death of Palestinians. If you look at Channel 14, the pro-Netanyahu commercial channel, they have a ticker on their website counting dead Palestinian terrorists, but they count everyone as terrorists. So now they have 30,000 plus dead terrorists in Gaza. They really celebrate the death of the people of Gaza. Mainstream Israelis, center, of course, left, they're not there. They're not there. They don't want to know, I think, because they don't want the moral conflict that would rise inside them if they do know about what's going on in Gaza. So it could be worse. That's the most optimistic thing I can say.
Are
As for
Israelis?
media consumption, we just finished a survey that was not published yet. And we see, and it goes hand in hand with what Oren just said, a sharp decline in the consumption of news and panels about the war, because people cannot take it in anymore. So what they do, they watch Netflix series and they do other kinds of streaming. The decline is very, very sharp. And also we saw that the people who watch Channel 14, that was just mentioned, they do not watch other channels, 11, 12, and 13. And those who watch 11, 12, and 13 do not watch Channel 14, which means that we have a new division here, a media division. And therefore, these two groups, people who watch 11, maybe they may want to see what's being shown on 13 or 12. But 14 is a totally different, continent, I would say. And it's very, very interesting that those watching 14 are not only people who define themselves as being on the right, more men than women, younger than older. So in a way, it reflects the new right, if you wish, the radical right with some extras. But this goes back to what we discussed earlier, that we cannot put all Israelis in one basket.
It's very similar, though, to what we've seen happen in our own country here. You know, that there are people who watch Fox News, and that's their news channel, similar to Channel 14, and then they're the MSNBC, CNN type. So you have really division also in terms of people's understanding based on what they're watching. You've seen the same thing, but are Israelis aware of how much the world has turned against them because of the war in Gaza?
Absolutely.
Okay, and what do they think about that?
As I said, as the song goes, the world is against us. So we are back to where Jews were throughout history, always persecuted, always being hated. This is so much hand in hand with the historical memory that people are being indoctrinated into in the schooling system and wherever. So it just justifies the deepest understanding of the place in the world. So they don't, they are, in a way, they are blind to the option that maybe some of the criticism is correct. Okay, they tend to say everything is wrong, and the fact that it goes also with the increase in the anti-Semitic events makes them more convinced that it is not because what we are doing, it's because we are Jewish and because the world hates us, and even when you bring them surveys that shows that many do empathize, even if they are critical, it's a no-go. It doesn't go through the filter.
How much, and maybe this is for you, Oren, in terms of the media, but certainly for you, Tamar, as well, the Netanyahu's impending trial have an influence on the ongoing war, that as soon as war ends, if people are going to turn on him. How much of that is reported in the media or not? How much do people think about that? What are the opinions about why he might see it in his best interest to continue this war?
Well, like Tamar said, the internal discussion in Israel has returned to the one that was before October 7th, pro-Netanyahu and anti-Netanyahu. And there is a lot of criticism against our prime minister for prolonging the war, not having any vision of the day after, because he knows that after the war ends, he might go out of office, and that would make his way to jail ever closer. So, you know, the whole current government is a government that was formed under the shadow of the trial. Not a lot of other parties wanted anything to do with Netanyahu, and he was forced to make a coalition with the extreme right and the ultra-Orthodox, and that's it. I would add that there's a more lasting effect of the trial and what made him indicted in the first place. I mean, the Israeli media came to October 7th very much weakened by the things Netanyahu did for the past decade, even more. He made it his mission to control the Israeli media ever since 2015, certainly, and even before. And the Israeli media fought him and, you know, tried to resist, but he put his own people everywhere and tried to get control of the media and try to put his people in charge. And it's like, if you spoke about Fox News, think about the American media after 15 years of Trump. Okay, so we have Fox News and you have Newsmax, and I don't know what else would come, but what would be left of NBC, CBS, all the other networks? That's more or less the situation in Israel, that the Israeli media came to this war when they were, you know, there's a sword on each media outlet has the threats coming from the government. So to their benefit, I have to say they didn't come from the best position to begin with.
How do you think that's influenced your work, Oren?
Well, I have a lot of work, and it's, you know, I go to the trial of Netanyahu a couple of times a week, and in times that I don't do that, there's so many stories to cover, about a lot of them about Netanyahu. I gave a talk with some high schoolers, and they said, "Why is your entire website about Netanyahu? I just visited your website, and you're supposed to be media." And I tried to explain to them how much the media is part of Netanyahu's mission, and how much you cannot differ anymore between Netanyahu and the Israeli state. if to say so, after so many years that he's been prime minister. So, you know, there's a lot to write about the Israeli media and the way that Netanyahu affects it.
So many questions here. I want to question you for Tamar is, why is the Israeli public so against the delivery of humanitarian aid to people in Gaza? They might not want to see the war end, but why are they against humanitarian aid?
I would say that the answer to that is related to the hostages issue. As long as the hostages are there, Israelis will not start even feeling empathy to the Gazans. Although this is not the main consideration of the government, it is a very high consideration in the minds and the hearts of the Israelis. And of course, we know that when bombs fall in Gaza, they may even kill some of the hostages. But basically, the idea here is that the hostages do not get enough food, that women are raped, that we just got an evidence from an Israeli woman who came back from Gaza, who told us about what she was under in Gaza. So as long as the hostages are there, I don't see a massive turning of the public against the continuation of the war or massively against the government. So the worst thing that Hamas is actually doing by holding the hostages is strengthening the right in Israel.
As you know, and I'll end with this, there's been a lot of move in this country for pushing for a ceasefire. How is that playing out in Israel? What are people thinking about in terms of ceasefire? What would that look like? What do people think needs to happen in order for there to be a ceasefire at this time?
Again, it's the hostage. By our data, we could have gotten to a much better situation if even the Red Cross could have visited the hostages, and if we got a list of people alive and people who are dead, so the families will know where they stand. So until this happens, I cannot see why Israelis would consider a ceasefire something that is in the benefit of Israel, because the resolution that was just passed in the Security Council, they said ceasefire until the end of Ramadan, right? And in return for releasing of the hostages, and we don't see any sign that the hostages are going to be back home in the foreseeable future. So you see, they cannot really consider seriously one side of the equation without seeing some prospects on the other side of the equation.
Oren, I don't know if you have some final words to contribute about that or anything else that you would like an opportunity to say as we're winding down here.
I just want to say, I hope that somehow we'll manage to get out of this one. It's just very frustrating to be a left-wing journalist in Israel these days.
Well, continue your good work. Know that there are people here supporting you and really need the information that we've learned today, and to be able to have a credible source of media that's really covering the complexity of what's happening in Israel and in the occupied territories. So thank you for your work. Thank you to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tamar, Oren, Andrea, for a fascinating presentation in a difficult time. Thank you to everyone who joined us. We hope you found the webinar as enriching as I did. I also want to share some special thanks to my colleague, Dr. Dinesh Sharma, for all his behind-the-scenes work making this discussion happen, both today and in years past. Because on a bittersweet note, I'll just say that this is Dinesh's last week serving as executive director for Partners for Progressive Israel after 7 years. An announcement is going to go out later today regarding Dinesh's successor. And I'll just read a few words that Partners President Paul Sham has written. Dinesh has done great and badly needed work, keeping us moving ahead during the difficult transition following the death in 2017 of our founder and benefactor, Harold Shapiro Zal. Dinesh has been with us through emergencies, long meetings, and various crises, always remaining unflappable and ready to work odd hours. We wish him well and we'll miss him. And I'll just say ditto to that as Dinesh starts his next chapter. Batzlacha, best of luck. Again, thank you to everyone who's joined us. I hope you can join us next time. And thank you to our incredibly fascinating and wonderful panelists for sharing their time today. Hope to see you next time.
Thank you.